Mr. President, over the next few days, Senator Reid and I will be leading the consideration of the National Defense Authorization Act for 2020. And I consider this, and I think you'd probably join me in this, that this is the most significant bill of the year, and it's the most important bill. There's an old document no one reads anymore called a Constitution. It says that what we're really supposed to be doing here, number one on the list is defending America. And now this bipartisan bill is more important than ever. The world is more unstable and dangerous than at any time in my lifetime. The National Defense Strategy gave it to us straight. Now this is the document. This National Defense Strategy Commission put this together. It was made up of experts, equally divided, Democrats and Republicans. We've had several hearings on this. We've had meetings. We've discussed it with our members. And in fact, Senator Kyle, during the brief time that he was back as a member of the Senate, dropped out of this and then went back in. He is very active in this, and so are the rest of them. None of the individuals here have ever been accused of being in any way partisan, but what they put together is a strategy, a defense strategy that is the best thing for this country, and they've done a masterful job of this. They actually put it straight to us, the strategic competition with China and Russia. You know, that's something that is new, relatively new. China and Russia, over the last administration, started surfacing, and they became more prominent, and they were challenging us in several areas. The continuing threats from rogue countries, they're still important too. We're talking about Iran, North Korea, and the other terrorist organizations. New technology and new warfighting domains in outer space and cyberspace, that's something that just in recent years has become very prominent, and we've got to compete. You know, we have our peer competitors out there even stating that they're ahead of us, not to mention years of underfunding of the previous administration. So when you think about the last administration, if you look at using fiscal year 2018 dollars, and you want to take the last 5 years of the previous administration, 2010 had an appropriation using constant dollars of $794 billion. 2015, 5 years later, was $586 billion. And so you stop and think about that. I can't think of any bureaucracy that's gone down that much, has taken that much of a dive in that period of time. We're talking about 20%. So we're facing that. That's a reality. And that's what we're doing right now in trying to get our defense authorization bill. Again, it will pass. That's one of the few things that you can do that you know it's going to pass. It's passed for the last 58 years, and it's going to pass this year too. But we're facing the real national security crisis. There are real threats to our military and our way of life, and we're ready to meet and defeat these threats. We've got to continue rebuilding our military, catching up with our competitors, and making strategic and holistic improvements to our national defense. I said catch up, and that clearly states that we're not ahead right now. Using the National Defense Strategy Commission report, this report right here, as our blueprint, this year's NDAA pursues urgent, quote, urgent change in significant scale to meet the needs of our nation. Our military leaders have said time and time again that stable, predictable, on-time funding is the single most important way Congress can help support strong national defense. We did this last year, and we're going to do it again this year. This is incredibly important that we stare down the barrel of sequestration cuts and would, in the words of former Air Force Secretary Wilson, quote, be absolutely devastating in scope and scale. Not just hers, but others have come before us, and they say, if we were to be subjected to sequestration, it would undo all the corrections that have been made in the last 2.5 years. So this would undo all the work that we've done to rebuild our readiness. And I'm talking about fiscal years 18 and 19. We also know that continuing resolutions are no way to do business, especially for our military. When we have the military in the hearings that we have, we've had historically or traditionally this year 2 very long meetings a year, hearings in the defense authorization our committee. And it has, each witness that comes in talks about how devastating it would be if we were to have to go back into sequestration, or if we had to undo the improvements that we have made. And so I know this firsthand. When I go out and visit military installations in Oklahoma, across the country, and around the world, it's true that we sit down with the commanders and the base leaders. We do that. But what we also do, and I know my good friend Senator Reed does this, and that is go and sit down and eat in the mess halls with our kids that are out there on the front lines and talk to them. And I have to tell you, they know what's going on. They know when we're dragging our feet and some of the funding efforts that we have to fund our military. They know who's doing it and who isn't doing it, and they're the best source of getting that information. The NDAA is the first step in the process of getting them that military funding. This year, we provided a total of $750 billion to ensure our troops have the resources they need to defend our nation. Now, this represents a bare minimum. People talk about the $750 billion, but you stop and think about it. What this report here says, that until we get back to the point where we have military where it should be, we're going to have to increase each year during this time frame about somewhere between $3 and $5 billion increase, net increase each year. That's in this book here, and that would be considered to be a bare minimum. And ironically, that's the same figure that our military uses. The NDAA aligns our defense resources and policies with our national defense strategy as found in this book. Full funding our military, that's $750 billion, means we'll be more ready to address great power competition like China and Russia. We're seeing our military lose ground. Anything less would keep us from regaining our combat advantage and to deter aggression. Let's say I'm using the words carefully. We're saying regain. That's what we need to do because we're not there now. So we can't plan to fight the wars of tomorrow with the weapons and equipment of yesterday. Now, the NDAA fully funds the nuclear modernization programs at or above request, including the nuclear triad and directs funding to procure critical equipment. The nuclear modernization program, it's been suffering for a long period of time. And a lot of people are saying they look at the triad system and they assume that somehow that's a redundancy. Well, it's not. It talks about systems that can project a nuclear weapon. And there are 3 different classifications. And that's what the triad's all about. So it's not as if it's 3 times you can take 1 or 2 out of it and still do the job. So we have in this bill 94 Joint Strike Fighters, 12 new battle force ships, 105 naval aircraft, new aircraft for the Air Force, including the 15 KC-46As, and new helicopters for the Army, including 9 new Chinooks. We've also got to be prepared to meet challenges in new domains. Space is one of those, as General Raymond, who's nominated to lead the U.S. Space Command, told my committee, our committee, that when we were having a hearing on this, that our superiority in space is questionable, and it's not guaranteed. I mean, that means that's work that has to be done. That's what you're finding in this bill that we're going to ultimately be voting for in the next few days. Our society relies on satellites and space technologies. We need to address this problem now before it's too late, and I'm glad President Trump has made this a key initiative. We took President Trump's directive to establish a Space Force and came up with a bipartisan plan to establish a force that meets our needs in space. Our bill would stand up the U.S. Space Force in the Air Force. This will create a cohesive strategy to protect our interests in space, improve how we acquire space assets, and improve our space warfighting culture. People are saying, you know, of all the things we're doing right now, we're doing a lot of things in space. You know, what does this do that we're not doing currently? And my answer is nothing. We're doing it all now, but this would allow us to do it better. And our plan prevents additional costs and bureaucracy and will get us off on the right foot to better fulfill our mission in space. The legislation also implements policies that would change the way the Pentagon is run, allowing it to respond more nimbly and effectively to current defense landscape. Last, but arguably the most important, the NDAA makes our all-volunteer force the backbone of our national defense, the biggest priority. You know, I happen to be one of the few people, in fact, I think I'm the only one in this Senate chamber who was a product of the draft. You know, that's back in the days we didn't have an all-volunteer force. And I came here absolutely convinced that was the best way to go. Now, until I started seeing the products that we have out there. When you go out and see these kids and what they're doing, it's just pretty amazing how effective they are, and they are truly the backbone of our national defense. So even though our military advantage may have been diminished, what hasn't changed is our troops. They're still the best in the world. We have to continue to look out for them. It's one of the biggest ways we stand apart from our adversaries or actors like Russia and China. They don't care about their people. We do. You know, a lot of times I hear people telling me, why is it we have to spend so much money on defense? I mean, we're spending more money than Russia and China. Yeah, that's real easy. Our largest single expense in putting together a military is what? It's end strength. It's the people. And we care about the people. And we make sure that we are doing things that are good for the people. I remember we had the big discussion on the privatization of commissaries not too long ago. And that was something where that is a benefit. It doesn't cost us any more, I contend, but that's a great benefit for those people, the spouses and the members of the military in remote places. That's where they go. That's where everybody wants to go. So, you know, it's true that it costs more, but that's because Russians, and I think it goes without saying, Russians and the Chinese, they don't really care about their people. They're going to tell them to get out and fight, and they have to do it. So that's the largest single item. They don't have that. We do, and we are better off for it. And that's what this bill is all about, to put us back. So we're on top. We're not second in any of these areas. It provides the 1.2% pay raise for our troops, and that's the largest we've had in more than 10 years. We improve the quality of life of our troops and their families, making sure our troops have quality health care and a solid roof over their heads. Just a few months ago, our committee became aware of some really serious problems in housing. This is only just about last February. And this is something, frankly, I was one of the guilty parties, because we privatized housing some time ago. And that was something, yeah, it's, in a way, it sure makes it easier for us. It makes it easier for the military. All of a sudden, we found ourselves in a situation where we sent out bids, and we had contractors that were bidding to do the housing work. But then we found out, worked fine for a couple of years. But then as time went by, and this is human nature, people got careless, and I think maybe the contractors got a little bit greedy. And so all of a sudden, we found out that we had housing for our people that are with mold and with all kinds of serious problems, and so we had a hearing on this. We actually have had 2 hearings on this. One was to listen to the tenants all throughout America that were talking about how deplorable that condition is, and the other was we brought in the contractors and talked to them. The thing that impressed me was during the second hearing of the contractors, they admitted there's a problem. They said if there is, we've become a little too relaxed, and they started to clean up their act. But just in case they didn't do that, we actually put a lot of those provisions in this bill that we are going to be considering now. It includes a tenant bill of rights. See, we weren't going to do this till the end of the summer. We're going to have another hearing and talk about what we needed to do to correct the problem. Well, we already know. They went out there and they looked. So in this bill, we have a tenant bill of rights. We have private housing partners. We're holding them accountable, ensuring each installation has the right personnel to conduct oversight. Overall, we make sure that our military has the infrastructure to support it. Within the funding for military construction, $3.6 billion is set aside to replenish funds that may be used to build a wall. There's been a lot of criticism, people saying, well, you use some military funds, maybe some of the funds that were going to be used for MILCON, military construction. And if that's the case, we have $3.6 billion that's set aside here to replenish any funds that might have been used to build a wall, so they don't have that argument anymore. As I said before, this is legislation that all of our colleagues from both sides of the aisle can support. Defense needs to be our #1 priority. We may not agree on everything, but we can definitely agree on that. The Senate Armed Services Committee approved the bill on an overwhelming bipartisan basis, 25-2, and in only 6 hours. This is kind of interesting because each year, it just falls this way, well, I guess intentionally. On a Wednesday, we get together, at 9 o'clock in the morning, and the Defense Authorization, the committee, the Senate Armed Services Committee, meets, and we go over what we're going to have to do in terms of this bill, and we get it done. And we got this done actually in 6 hours. I thought that was a record, and we did it a little less than that time this time. But we had a product that was 25-2. Only 2 people voted against it. We completed this work quickly, less than 2 months after receiving the administration's budget request. It was my goal to get this done as soon as possible, and I thank the committee and the staff for helping get this done. We all understand the importance of this bill. This is the most important bill of the year. I think most people understand that and agree to that. The committee we considered on this committee 433 amendments and approved nearly 300 of them. Our markup took 6 hours just because of our shared commitment to working together. So I want to thank particularly the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator Reid, and every member of the committee working to pass this critical legislation. I want to thank the Majority Leader, Senator McConnell, for his leadership and for continuing the fight for a budget deal that includes a strong top line for our defense. I look forward to continuing this fair, collaborative process on the floor in the coming days. We're going to consider amendments. Both Senator Reid and I want an open amendment process. Then we're going to pass this bill for the 59th straight year in a row. For nearly 6 decades, Congress has understood the necessity of a strong, capable, lethal force. And the main reason America is the leader of the free world is because of our military might. Our armed forces are the very best in the world. Our leadership and values pave the way for liberty, prosperity, and security across the globe. We preserve peace through our strength. You know, who else said that? Ronald Reagan talked about the necessity to be strong so that we can avoid the very type of threats that are out there. Freedom isn't free. We understand that. We want to preserve this vital role, a role that guarantees a future of freedom and democracy for our children, our grandchildren. We've got to prioritize our national security, and that's what we've been doing with this NDAA, and that's why we're going to continue to do it with the passage of this bill. Again, I want to express my appreciation. It's a tough bill, and we've spent a lot of hours together, Senator Reid and myself, and I think we have something now that is going to be going through. We do have an amendment process. It's an open amendment process, and we plan to do that and get that done. I have a unanimous consent request here, unanimous consent that the Senate resume consideration of the motion to proceed to 1790, S-1790. And a further one, Mr. President, I request unanimous consent to grant floor privileges for the duration of this consideration of the NDAA to Kyle Stewart, my defense fellow, and Jennifer Doherty, the GAO detailee. With that,